One was to reconsider food eligibility and to set up something in which some foods might be ineligible. And this came about because of increasing research demonstrating that not only are food stamp recipients very high in, the prevalence of obesity is very high among low-income people in general, but it's even higher in food stamp recipients. And that, of course, is very worrying. So with that, there have been lots and lots of recommendations about this. And the current SNAP eligibility rules are here. You can't buy beer, wine, or liquor, food eaten in store, hot foods that are cooked, or dietary supplements, but you can buy any fresh foods you want, seeds and food plants, that's kind of a good one. But you also can buy processed foods, sodas, and snack foods. And a lawyer in Oakland, Michelle Simon, did this report a couple of years ago, Food Stamps Follow the Money, in which she did an investigation of where food stamp money was spent, who got it, and who profited from it. And her argument is that retailers are the huge beneficiaries of food stamps. Food stamps are great for individuals, but they're even better for retailers, like particularly Walmart, which gets a huge fraction of food stamp money. Remember, we're talking about $70 billion a year in expenditures. I live in New York City, and we have a Walgreens in my neighborhood in Manhattan that has these signs up on the soda trays, the ice cream trays, and the Red Bull trays. We accept SNAP cards in English and Spanish. And no such signs exist on the fruit and vegetable sections where they have a small number of fruits and vegetables, because stores that can accept SNAP dollars must also sell fruits and vegetables. And if you don't understand why drugstores are looking more and more and more like grocery stores, think SNAP. It's the explanation for that. So whether that's good, bad, or indifferent is something that is worth thinking about, and certainly worth policy consideration if you wanted to change it. Now, what did the Farm Bill do about SNAP? The 2014 Farm Bill had only one issue to discuss, and that was how to cut the money spent on SNAP. The big debate during the time that the House and Senate were dealing with the Farm Bill was whether SNAP should be cut by $4 billion or $20 billion. Eventually, Congress went with the smaller cut, and so the cuts in SNAP benefits by household size, shown in the figure on the right, were relatively small. These don't sound like very big amounts, but if you're somebody who's counting on SNAP as the last element of the food safety net in the United States, having $36 taken away from your household of four could be quite meaningful. Other people were concerned about the cuts too, and it was interesting that the Wall Street Journal, that radical newspaper, talked about how retailers were braced for the reduced food stamps and mourning that the cuts would fall particularly hard on grocers, discounters, dollar stores, and gas stations that depend heavily on low-income shoppers. So that's the Farm Bill. And the question is what to do about it. And here I think we face a really serious dilemma. And that dilemma is that there's almost nothing that's going to work, either in any way whatsoever. So if your strategy is incremental change, and that's the strategy that's being used now, you go to Congress and you lobby item by item. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of places where lobbying worked and where it almost worked, came really close. The risk is that you don't get any improvement in any of this. You could split it. You could split SNAP off of the Farm Bill and look at agricultural policy and welfare policy and nutrition policy as completely separate entities and try to deal with them separately, the risk is you can't get the votes for either one. Or you could start from scratch and try to create an ideal, and that is so politically impossible in our current political climate that it's really hard to think about. So the creators of this course and the people working on this course are mostly talking about the agricultural piece of this policy and ignoring SNAP as if it's not part of the Farm Bill, let alone 80% of the Farm Bill. And so Michael Pollan, in his really extraordinary letter in 2008 in the New York Times Magazine, before Obama got elected, talked about resolarizing the American farm system, meaning changing the way we deploy energy in the farm system, re-regionalizing it so that it make it more local, rebuilding America's food culture so it's not so heavily dependent on meat, and changing the Farm Bill to a food bill. Really worth reading and worth thinking about. The American Enterprise Institute has similar goals. It's kind of amazing. They have a whole series of potential reforms of the Farm Bill to try to make it more in line with American enterprise. And there are people, advocacy groups, Dan Imhoff, who's written probably the best guide to the Farm Bill. Food Fight was his 2012 edition. And Farm Bill 101, which comes from Food and Water Watch. These are very important documents that are really helpful in understanding this. Also are talking about agricultural issues. What to do about SNAP is the overwhelming issue about SNAP, and the unifying issues is to protect it from further budget cuts while everybody's figuring out how to make it healthier. And there are 4 different groups of advocates who are related to SNAP: the anti-obesity health advocates, the anti-hunger advocates, the anti-poverty advocates, and the agricultural sustainability advocates don't always have the same view of whether SNAP recipients should have more restrictions on what they can buy with their SNAP dollars, but everybody agrees that SNAP dollars need to be protected because it's the only thing left of the safety net for the poor. Another approach is to try to align agriculture and health policies, and this is to take a look at obesity and see what the Farm Bill could do in order to reduce the prevalence of obesity. And there are lots of groups working on this: the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, and various university groups over the years have produced excellent reports on how you would align agricultural policy with health policy. And you're going to hear about this in particular in the last session in this course, when Mark Bittman and Michael Pollan talk about the editorial that they wrote with Ricardo Salvador and Olivier Dushooter on how a national policy, a national food policy, could save millions of American lives. And so you'll want to start thinking about how this gets us to that point, but they'll talk about that later on. In the meantime, I want to talk about some of the tweakings that seem actually to have done some good. So in the 2014 Farm Bill, there was more money for organic agriculture research and extension. And you can see from the figure in the upper left-hand corner that from the 2002 Farm Bill to the 2014 one, the amount of money spent on organic agriculture has gone up quite a lot, to the point where it's about $170 million in the current Farm Bill. If you're somebody at my income level, $170 million sounds like really a lot. If you're talking about $100 billion a year for the Farm Bill, it's a rounding error. The Department of Agriculture announced this week that it's going to be spending $18 million on locally grown food, and it also has this other larger program on local and organic farming, and this was authorized by the Farm Bill. So this is a big step forward. It's a foot in the door, it's a step forward, and the numbers are going up, and that's where you want them to go. Every now and then, a little miracle gets snuck into the Farm Bill, and this was one. When I was reading the Farm Bill earlier in 2013, I read the horticulture section and came across Food and Agriculture Service Learning Program. What's that? And it said, a service learning program to increase knowledge of agriculture and improve the nutritional health of children? The purposes of this program are to increase the capacity for food, garden, and nutrition education within host organizations or entities and school cafeterias and in the classroom. Who is doing that? Who is doing that, and who was going to get authorization of $25 million over 10 years to do it? That's who. When I saw that, I immediately got in touch with Deborah Eschenmeyer, who's now at Let's Move, and Kurt Ellis, who've been running Food Corps, and said, I just read this thing in the Farm Bill that sounds just like Food Corps. And they said, shh, don't tell anybody. And there was a good reason for not telling anybody about it. I mean, this is a fabulous program. And there's a reason for not telling anybody about it, because when it came to authorization of the bill, it got left out. So even though it was in the Farm Bill, it was not authorized. The money wasn't authorized, and so they didn't get any money for it. But the fact that it was in the Farm Bill at all was phenomenal, and that has to do with tweaking, which is one of the reasons why tweaking and lobbying in the Farm Bill isn't such a bad idea. And maybe next time it'll get there and get funded, and that, of course, is the hope. So my urging to you is to advocate. If you're interested in Farm Bill issues, you have to pick a piece of it that you really care about and concentrate and become an expert on that one piece. You can't do the whole thing. Don't even try. But certainly the pieces that you care about, you can advocate for. There are lots of organizations that are working on these issues. You can join them. You can advocate for them. Beyond that, and even with this, you need to engage in the political system in order to do that. The Farm Bill is politics writ large. And some of the ugliest politics you will ever see in the United States, where there's lots and lots and lots of money involved. If you want to change this and get a Farm Bill that promotes health and the environment, you have to engage in the political system and figure out a way to do that that will be effective. And you have to be very patient, because this kind of thing takes a very, very long time. But what I think everybody should be doing this, because this is democracy in action, and I want all of you to urge all of you to join the food movement, because that's the only way the Farm Bill is ever going to get fixed. Thank you very much.
We have time for questions, so the mics are out there. Put your hands up and start asking questions.